Talofa and welcome to the Mo'unga Project. I'm your host, Reina Kapiolani Pahulu, and I'm joined by the lovely Tulai Lupe Amanu and the Erin Afalava. Today we're going to do our last episode of the series. We're going to do our 2020 wrap-up and just talk about different things concerning the year, the different pivotal points, and our series as a whole. So I'm excited and grateful to be here with you all and do this finally. It's been a little while coming, and I don't know, we have a little different setup as well. We're actually in person, which is a different dynamic and very cool. So I wanted to start off with, I think, something that's been huge on all of our minds, the election of 2020, and kind of how that has shaped and impacted our community. Can we start with you, Erin? What does that look like for you? How's the election affected the community that you're seeing, whether that's friends, families, households? Yeah.
I think, especially with this election around, I think generally the U.S. populace is pretty on edge on election year. Right, that's just kind of normal. I think within our community, though, specifically, I've seen a lot more of our Pacifica folks, a lot more engaged, involved, and actually taking it seriously. Right, they're being more educated on things, and whether it's whatever their political views may be, I've noticed that our community is. I feel, and I've seen, especially through this 2020 election, they've been a lot more engaged, which is good. With that being said, unfortunately, I've also seen there's been a lot of misinformation, especially within our Pacifica community, and I think that's kind of shaped so many of our households, especially when we look at our multi-generational homes. Normally, the younger folks tend to be a little more liberal than their parents or grandparents, and so there's that dynamic as well. And I think, especially with our political system now, I feel like our country as a whole is just completely divided, and so that does translate, especially into our Pacifica homes, unfortunately too. I've seen that as well. Fortunately for me, though, I've actually seen my parents, who tend to be a little more conservative. They've actually been paying a little more attention, being a little more critical of this current administration now too, which is a good thing. And where my mom actually texted me and let me know of how she was voting, and so, which was surprising for me. So it's good. So I'm happy to see that with this past election, with everything that's been going on, especially with this unique year. I think it's good to see where our Pacifica people are moving towards politically. So
Gotcha, thank you. What about you, Lai? What have you seen?
I definitely, I saw a lot of the divide that Erin was touching on, and within households, I think that this year more than ever before, I think that divide, you see it every election year, you see divide amongst, different communities and ethnicities, races, but I think this year it was a little different because it was within households. Like, I know a lot of people personally that felt very strongly one way, but then their significant other felt very strongly the other way. And I have personal testament to that, whether it was friends or family. And then I saw also a lot of just influx of angst and anxiety. I know for me, election week, I was definitely anxious. We were all kind of on edge. We're texting each other. We're trying to stay updated. We're losing sleep over this election because for a lot of us, it was such a pivotal election. For a lot of us, it came down to just we were all, I think, on both sides. I don't want to say sides necessarily, but on both ends of the spectrum, we were all so passionate about what was happening this year in particular. So kind of what Erin said, just in our community, I saw that people were a lot more willing to be vocal, whether that be positive or negative is subjective, because for me personally, I saw a lot of that, just negative toxic energy, especially on social media. We're all pretty active on social media. And so I think that was one thing that was kind of hard for me, was to navigate social media and figure out like where I wanted to put my energy, because, as much as, or as important as the election was to me, I was like, my mental health is also important, our mental health and our community. And at the end of the day, regardless of what the outcome, was going to be at the time, it was just like, there's things after this that have to continue. Like, we have to push forward as a people, as a community. So for me, that's kind of just some of what I saw during this election.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because, we are talking about this several weeks after. So there was a lot of hype and energy surrounding like election week. I know for myself, if you, a friend of mine on social media, I had a lot to say. And for worse or for better, I was getting into arguments with different people on, again, very opposite sides of the spectrum. We're all operating from a place of like, we think we know what's right, and a place of like, this will make our country better. I think for me, it's very much like the human level. And so like, if we're not addressing things in which, things are equitable for people across any like identity in this country, it's like, how can we even worry about like the economy or like the military if we're not taking care of people at like such basic levels? And so I was very fired up. I think I got a lot of my angst in crazy vocal things that I had to say, definitely during like the first week or so, but it's calmed down. I'm trying to come from a place of togetherness and community once more. I don't know, and we'll have to see come January 20th is it? Inauguration day, if we get to that. What are we hoping to see from this potentially new administration moving forward? And we'll start with you again, Aaron.
A whole lot. It definitely depends on one's politics, of course, and views, but for me, I think there's been a lot of steps that have been taken back with this current administration. And so there's a lot of ground that I know the Biden administration needs to make up as well. So I know we'll be talking about it, but for one thing is healthcare, COVID-19. I think that's something that I'm looking forward to seeing what this administration will do. I am pretty sure we all know what we want them to do and to accomplish, and that's of course limiting the spread of this disease, and then also some type of relief for everyone that has been impacted, and we all have, financially, emotionally. You have it. So I think going forward as well, it's crazy because just to go back to, I think with this past administration, and especially this year, we've all seen the downfalls of government, which it explains why so many people are have a negative connotation towards our government. And so there's a whole bunch. I mean, social justice, that's, it's crazy to see that an incoming president, a president-elect, acknowledges something as important as Black Lives Matter, or that he acknowledges human beings as a whole, LGBTQ community. We have our first Black vice president as well. So there's that perspective as well that's coming into the White House. Which is huge. And if you've been paying attention as well, the president-elect's transitioning and cabinet as well that he's choosing from, most of them are women.
A lot of women. Yeah.
A lot of women, and a lot of folks of color. And so I'm looking forward to that. With that type of government, I'm hoping to see a government that actually looks out for those same people that they're putting at that position too, Because ultimately I know the important thing is that we have a government that not only just looks like us, but understands us, shares our interests. When we have a government that shares our interests, that means that's a government that will enact policy for the betterment of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So there's a whole lot that I'm
we
expecting. We
want to see a lot of change,
right? And there's so much, especially because there's been so many setbacks from Trump and his administration.
Are there, like, if you could off the top of your head, like any one particular issue that you're vying for that we can get through to help the people?
Just our country as a whole, or like our Pacific community
as a whole, or even if you want to be more succinct about our community specifically.
Sheesh. I don't know. There's just there's a lot. I wish I could narrow it down, but there's just way too much. I would say then, because it's been such a huge factor and element in this election, I would just refer to healthcare. Mm-hmm. I think what we see as well is we see Biden and Kamala Harris as a representation of the establishment Democrats, right? And so there's also been a lot of push from the further left, like folks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, Ayanna Pressley, who are all very much progressive. And so I think with healthcare specifically, I know that part of the spectrum, or within the Democratic Party, I know they want the Biden administration to be a lot more strong towards healthcare and enacting, a universal healthcare, a single payer system as well, and which I would love to see as well, because especially with this pandemic, I think it's important that we have that, which a lot of other major developed countries have, especially as the richest country on earth. We should have a system as such. But so that's me. Healthcare, I would say.
And like, same question. Is there any one particular issue that you're hoping we really champion in this new administration?
I think because we were so directly affected by it, I would say, Aaron touched on it, but COVID, I would say that needs, first and foremost, that needs to be not only addressed, but there needs to be some relief. There needs to be, especially with our community being one of the hardest hit communities, highest percentage of cases as well as deaths among, other races. It's just, that is something that needs to be handled, because we're going almost a year into the pandemic, and we had one stimulus check, which didn't even, maybe lasted a few weeks for most households. And then, they had stopped the additional $600 on the unemployment, which also affected those that weren't even working. And so I just think the administration as a whole, I think personally that is the number one issue that needs to be attacked. And that's just because of the insane amount of deaths we've had. We currently have the most deaths in the entire world, and being as powerful and as rich of a country as we are, that should not be the case, in my personal opinion. It should not have gotten this bad, and it should not have been this bad for this long. And so I would like to see, some really more critical changes take place next year, hopefully. So I'm hopeful about it. But
yeah, same.
Yeah, and kind of going down that path, there's talks of a new vaccination. What are our thoughts on that? If
it's scientifically proved, I know the FDA actually just said that it's good to go. So I mean, if it's actually helping, and if it's scientifically proven to help, then I'm all for it. It's science. I trust these folks to actually. Right. These are people's lives, and so I don't think they'll take it take it lightly. So I would trust it. I would urge everyone to trust it if it becomes available to us anytime soon, which it should be. But I would trust it, and I I think everyone should too.
I think, I see a lot of people, especially now that they've released that, I've seen a lot of people on social media, unfortunately, just spread more misinformation. Mm-hmm. And I think, if you don't trust the government, you don't trust the vaccine, that's your prerogative. Do your,
fair enough.
Do your research and whatnot. But, make sure the information that you're gathering is not just from like one source, and one source that is extremely one way or the other. I think that it's dangerous territory once you become that way. And I am obviously, because I think COVID needs to be handled, I'm pro-vaccine, and I think that we just need to get a handle on it. But then again, like I said, I've seen it more than ever lately within our community and on social media, just that a lot of people are very hesitant, and like I said, that's your prerogative. You can be hesitant, you can be distrusting of the government, because a lot of times they fail us.
Oh yeah.
So there's nothing against that, but I personally think that we need to get a handle on COVID, and it's taking far too many lives. So.
Right, and that's also a step in the right direction for our country too, healthcare wise, right? If there is a vaccine, that is improvement for all of us. It means that we get to move towards a sense of normalcy, right, or pre-COVID. So, I think it's important.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to not having to wear masks. I'm not an asshole, so I wear them, but I'd really like to not wear them. And so that's something to look forward to. I don't know. The COVID is just such a huge thing, and it has become a bit of a dead horse that we're constantly beating, but it's because we haven't actually beat it yet. And so, yeah, I mean, like you touched on one stimulus check.
Which is crazy. I mean, that's not even, like, even for me, that doesn't even cover rent and utilities for 1 month for me. So
for a single
exactly, and I
person,
I live by myself, and so it's like, can you imagine these households filled with children or multi-generational households, like, and people that have been laid off as soon as COVID hit? It's crazy that there wasn't more done earlier on, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, and I think what COVID has done, for better or for worse, is it's exposed so many holes in our structure and government, and in the way that we view ourselves and posit ourselves as like the cream of the crop as far as countries are concerned on planet Earth.
Well, yeah, I mean, now more than ever, I think so many people were so afraid of free healthcare for everybody because they believe it's like a socialist, ideal. But it's like when a pandemic like this happens, why doesn't everybody have free healthcare? Like, why doesn't every single person in our country have accessible healthcare, or have the resources to be tested as frequently as the rich and wealthy? Like, it makes no sense. It doesn't commute to me. It doesn't. And so you saying that it exposes that is absolutely true, because before this year, I think a lot of people just kind of, skated by and was like displaced that thought, and if it didn't affect them directly. But now this year, it's like you can't ignore issues like that. You can no longer look away. It should have never been ignored, but
yeah.
There needs to be, I think, as well, when you talk about the exposure with COVID-19, it's definitely exposed a lot of holes, politically and financially for so many homes. And I think I know, like, his experience with herself, but I know with me it's exposed a lot in my own life that I've had to reflect on as well. Just it's put so much into perspective for me and so many others, as far as seeing, for instance, just what's really important.
Right.
I think luckily we've been able to see positives from this pandemic. You have seen people with their families now. They're at home with their families a lot more. They're starting to see what's really most important, like their families. For some, it's their faith, and so I think it's yeah, there's a lot to it. But I agree. I think there's just been so many people that have been negatively affected, especially financially, that there has to be some type of relief. And it's only right to as well, because there needs to be that sense of community as well. If we are to get through things like a pandemic, it makes no sense to not look at it as a sense of community and trying to gain a solution or move forward. So I agree.
I think another like angle worth mentioning is on the local level. And when we say community, the people who we see every day and like grassroots organizations, the people who are on the ground doing work, how do we, because I feel like that's where change happens the most, like directly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but how do we inspire folks, especially in our community, to become more civically engaged and concerned about like how these things affect us? Because talking about the presidency even almost seems like talking like in the ether, like
sure,
yes. Because it
feels so distant.
Yeah, it's so many like offices above us that we can. I think the only thing we can really surmise like directly from like Trump, anyways, is like how he carried himself, and that's the only. His optics is what's really affecting us. But like on the local level, like who's doing the work and how do we get more of us on the ground to do the work? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Do either of you have thoughts on that?
I think, I think one tool that we can utilize that I've personally found helpful is social media. It's kind of like it's a hit or miss, because you do have the misinformation spreading, but you also have a lot of people out there, if you seek them out, a lot of therapists, a lot of people that are involved in grassroots organizations, a lot of people on our Monga team, even that help me to see a different side of social media where it's not just the vain, like, we love selfies, we love those, we all love those funny videos, but it's like you can also, if you're seeking it out, you can definitely find those people that are doing the work. And one is like spreading, the work that they're doing, getting that spread out from a local level to like a more, widespread audience. That's one thing that I've learned has been really helpful. And then also just participating in those events. Like I think our Monga project is a great example of that. It's just, finding the people that are on the ground wanting to push that work forward and then participating and engaging and not just liking and viewing. That's great, but it's like you can also take it one step further and ask those people, because I wouldn't even say I'm one of those people. Like I'm definitely not one of those resources in my mind, but there are people that I've come across and people that I've met that, it's just a question away. Like, what can I do? Can I join you? There are some nonprofits that even like Erin is a part of, some groups that, here and there I'll ask like, when can I participate or what can I do? Because unless you're out there like really with your feet on the ground doing that work, you're going to feel distant from the work, Right. And so for me, it's just hands-on, like asking, inquiring, seeking out knowledge, and then doing the work.
When I think of the work, though, I disagree with you, Lai, in the fact that you are doing the work. I think because it doesn't take much. I think yes, the system that we have set in place, it discourages so many within our community because we think it's this giant thing, and it is because it's a system that wasn't designed for our people. But if we just break it down, we can actually see that there are ways for our people to become civically engaged and actually be successful in it. There are already so many of our people, especially here in the state of Utah, that have gone on to elected offices and such, especially this year. So I think it doesn't, for those that want to be civically engaged or want to do the work, find the work, I would just let all of them know that it doesn't take much. We already have family members that are impacted by COVID-19. We are so susceptible to this pandemic as well. A lot of our families are already suffering financially. We already have this sense of family and community because we're so close with our family. So I would say the desire is already there. it really is just a matter of just showing up,
Right.
right? It just show up, whether it's a local government meeting or election. Like it doesn't take much. We just have to show up. If you're willing to like something or share something online, it doesn't take much to sign up for something or register for something. There's just so many tools and resources, a lot of which I know the Maunga Project has put forward and that we can put forward after too. But yeah, no, that's all. I hope I disagree. But yeah, I disagree. There's so many people
totally
like that feel like they're not putting in that work, but they are, because they simply for the fact that they're living their lives in this country with a system that wasn't initially designed for them. So
I agree with that.
Amen. I think there's so many ways that you can go about being active in community, and it looks like so many different things. And like Erin said, we can always put forth like a resource list, because we have, especially here on the local level, speaking for Utah, we have PICTAR, we have UPSEC, we have UPIC, we have PFF, we have BAL, we have like in so many sectors in the arts, health, politics, and so it's beautiful to see. I think I don't know, back in my hometown in California, I didn't see that happening. So to see it so like fervent, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel, of course. We just want to be able to show up and support what's already out there. But if you do have a new initiative, we'll never discourage that.
Right.
Oh yeah.
There's just so many great things that are happening that everyone can be a part of. And again, social media is a great tool, but like you said, there's a point, or I feel like what you were meaning to say as well, where that's a step, and then you can always go a step further,
Right.
whether
There's
that
always
means
more,
showing up to a protest.
Right, it wasn't to discourage,
Yeah.
people that, keep it strictly to social media. It's just to say, like, there's just so much more that we all can do. And, having the attitude of it's going to get done outside of me or someone else is going to do it is kind of what's detrimental, I feel, to especially a community like the PI
Especially
community.
with our community.
Exactly, like we're already so lax and laid back as it is, that I think, that's what I would like to see, is just people taking more initiative and, acknowledging the hard work that those before us have done, but also just kind of carrying that baton and furthering it with our generation, because we saw a lot of the older generation. I think for me personally here in Utah, I saw a lot of those people kind of pushing the work forward, and then at this point it's up to us to not only do that, but then to teach our future generations, so as to make even bigger change, a more impactful change.
Gotcha. Were there other things that we wanted to impact concerning like the election, previous administration, this transition into new administration, Erin?
It's hard to
crazy
unpack. Yeah, I mean,
there's so much.
there's just so much, dude.
Yeah.
All I have to say, well, it probably won't be all I have to say, but with 2020, it's taught us all so many lessons. I would just hope that our community is only motivated from this year as well. Again, and I've seen that positive drive from so many people within our community, and I think one of the things is because everything's been virtual and online, social media as well. So yeah, no. Again, like you said, there's nothing wrong with being vocal or having an advocacy online, because that's important, especially in this day and age, and especially in this pandemic. That's how so many of these systems and programs are running. So all I'm just saying is just don't be discouraged, don't be intimidated. A lot of those, especially that are our age, millennials, Gen Zs, help and educate your parents and your grandparents, your aunts and your uncles. I know that can be fatiguing as well. There's just so much anxiety behind that sometimes too, especially just the way the dynamic of our culture is. but just don't be discouraged, because at the end of the day, there's always going to be family that find that to be a good thing, find that inspiring too. And like you said, it's important that we teach the upcoming generations to become more involved, to be more vocal, because again, we already are a minority within minority, so it's important that we're out there, especially with this pandemic, that I hopefully put into perspective that we are the demographic that's being mostly affected by this healthcare crisis. We should be more involved. So,
gotcha. Lottie, anything else for you as far as this year and the election or administration?
As far as the administration, just are you speaking to things that I want to see happen kind of next year? I'm hoping, and a lot of people aren't as hopeful, and it might be naive of me, but I am hoping that the new administration does take heed to minorities, to us, on a local level, to those of us that are mostly affected by, just by housing or, health care, just loss of jobs and income in general. I'm hoping that we see some changes in those regard, because in my opinion, those things should be accessible to everyone. Those, a livable wage should not be a political dispute. And so in my mind, I'm trying to remain hopeful. It's hard, it's very hard. It's easier, I think, to be cynical, because we've just been failed time and time again as a community, as a people. And so it's easy to feel that we're not cared for because we haven't been. And I guess I'm just kind of holding on to that hope of seeing that in the next couple of years. And that's just what I would like to see. There's some changes in policy that affect, our people, my family, my friends, my community. And it's things like that, healthcare, livable wages, So that's kind of all I have in that regard.
Got you. Thank you. I think to pivot things a bit and not necessarily wrap up on such a somber note, I wanted to talk about briefly kind of what were our favorite episodes and or moments for this series as a whole. I think this is episode 6. Hopefully I'm doing my math right.
I think that's right, yeah.
Episode 6, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes.
Yes.
If anyone has ever joined us, thank you. There's such a lot, from casting to briefings prior, and then our recordings and the release. I'm just so fortunate to have done this with y'all. Y'all are my friends. Hopefully, I don't know. There was so much, and I hope to do more in the future. But I think for me, just to kind of start things off, my favorite episode, and hopefully everyone got a chance to look at it, was the LGBTQ episode. That one meant so much to me personally as a laity, and then starting this project, I really wanted to give a voice for all of us, as millennials and Gen Zs of the Pacifica diaspora, content and media that reflected us, but then more specifically, hyper focusing on different facets of our community, like the LGBTQ. I just felt like our stories weren't being told enough, and so having to get that experience with that panel in particular, it just, I don't know, it meant so much to me. And so that, I think hopefully people have seen it. If you haven't, go watch it.
Please do.
It's an amazing episode.
That was definitely my favorite. I don't know, Aaron, you?
Yeah, and I kind of want to build off of that too, but within the Samoan culture, with Samoa, there's something called va, and that's your space. That's space that's sacred and holy to an individual, and that's why, for instance, what many can relate with, when you enter into someone's space, you say "too low" or "excuse me," just because that's the va, or the space is supposed to be sacred. And so having that type of space as well was it was so inspirational to see as well, for so many of that saw that. I think for me, it was the live I did with Lucky Edwards on masculinity. We had a good discussion about masculinity in general, and then we narrowed it down to how masculinity looks in the Pacifica community. Though we came from both a Samoan background, I think it related well with everyone. And I think especially in the Pacific Islander cultures, a lot of us can relate to this toxic masculinity within our cultures, within our households. And so, yeah, I think it was my favorite just because there was so much that I learned, even though that it was like our hosted episode or hosted live. Like, I was like, dude, I learned so much. And Lucky is awesome. So I learned a lot, not just from the live, but even our discussions outside of that platform. We talked so much about how masculinity has affected our men in our Pacific Islander homes, and that it shouldn't be this barrier, which is a barrier that we actually as a people didn't build. It's kind of this learned barrier that we've learned to build over the years with white supremacy and so forth. But there's this barrier of keeping our emotions back, of also projecting our thoughts of control and combining masculinity with control, and how that can be detrimental to the family, which I know we also talked about. So yeah, there was a lot to discuss in that, but I think just as a man that discussion was so important to me, and I hope it was so important for everyone else that was watching too. But yeah, that was mine.
Yeah, well, definitely. I feel like that's an episode in and of itself.
Yes.
So that was like
a mini episode,
a precursor, preface, and so I'm excited to see, and you'll probably be the one to spearhead that at some point. So go ahead and mentally prepare for
I'm
that.
all for it.
Lai, what was your moment?
My favorite episode was the grief episode, and just without getting into too much detail, it was really cool to see people from within our community, our PI community, come together and discuss their experiences with grief. And, we went over the positives of being such a communal type of people, like communal grieving, but we also touched on the negatives and how, for a lot of us, and myself being one of those people, having lost my mom at such a young age, it was just validating to hear that other people had a similar experience. Other people that looked like me and that represented me had that experience of, just not being able to grieve properly, or not having, healthy tools to help us, guide us and grieve, at such a young age. And then even into adulthood, a lot of us weren't grieving properly. And so for me, that episode hit home because I think I was the most vulnerable on it. If you all remember, I cried. I was so embarrassed, but
She always cries.
I always cry, but I definitely cried in that episode as well, just reflecting on my childhood and acknowledging, it kind of opened up those wounds, but also helped me to acknowledge that a lot of my childhood trauma in regard to my mother's death was not dealt with. And so for me, it was amazing. It was inspiring, like Aaron said, just to be in that space with people that have also lost loved ones and also felt lost and as if they didn't know how to navigate those emotions, because I sure as hell did not for years. And then I'm still working through things, but our project as a whole, that's one thing that it's done for me, is just open my eyes to see the positives, but also the negatives within our community and our culture, because a lot of it is cultural, right? And a lot of it is learned behavior. We had no choice in how we were brought up in most senses. And so, that was my favorite episode. And it was a great one, but if you watch it, you're going to see me crying. And, I don't want to get emotional on here, but that was definitely the episode that hit home. So
that episode, but it was really revealing, I think, to me too, when I can reflect on that episode, because I think also in that episode that's when I initially brought up the thought of masculinity,
right,
and how that affects
right.
our grieving processes, especially for men. So yeah, that was revealing to me, because I was never thinking about that, and I've never really thought about how I grieved, and also why it was important, right? Because man, that episode just revealed so much on how we are grieving, and then in what ways we can improve.
Because I think Malaya had brought up, her personal experience, which led into the masculinity discussion because of her father and things like that. So
because our women have that down. I mean, as far as like being open and vulnerable, there's just so much power behind being vulnerable. So yeah, I love that episode too. That was a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the spirit of that episode in particular, it was such a necessary,
absolutely,
especially this year,
time and space. I feel like I've been mourning all year, and to recall and hold space for. I'm still in mourning of Margarita Satini, who was an amazing everything. I've already cried about her on media. I shouldn't. I'll save the tears for that later, but she was amazing and such an example of a civic engagement and duty to community, not necessarily because people were making her do it, but because she just felt compelled to do so. She saw that our community needed so much and did so much in response, and I'm just ever grateful and inspired by her. Another person who I'd love to hold space for is Leilani Funaki-Laufiso, who was a part of another project that I spearhead, Manava, which gave me the opportunity to connect with different women. And I guess that's one positive about the pandemic, is just like having to switch to the online and virtual world completely. It gave me that opportunity to connect with people who I might not have otherwise, and in such an intimate way. Like you've been to a few of our sessions and circles, and so it's something that you can't really describe. You just kind of join and cry and laugh with random strangers, and you bond through that experience. So that was great. And same thing with Leilani. I will forever hold her in my heart and spirit, and just grateful that she was able to give me all that she has in 2020.
Yes.
But yeah.
Powerful women, both of them.
Exactly. I think it important that we also acknowledge the rest of our team members who aren't here today because they're not local, or they are just love to work behind the scenes. We have Lauren Ungia, Shanis Yaki, Ashley. We have Malaya Thompson, Marosa Uyangalile. Just so many great people who have been a part of this. Samantha Kivalu.
The everythinger.
She couldn't be here today, but I really wish she could have, but we're thankful nonetheless. Happy belated. She's I feel like the glue behind all of it.
She did it all.
Yeah.
So on top of, like, if you ever got an email from us, it was probably Sam.
Absolutely.
And just coordinating so many things. I know, especially like when I wasn't feeling my best self and able to like push forward with things, she was always right there, like, hey Raina, get in there, friend. So I'm so thankful. All of y'all are so very talented in your own ways, and you brought something so special to the project in your own way. I feel fortunate to like I've gotten to do this with you all. So thank you. If I haven't said it enough, thank you. I think just one final thing that I want to open up is kind of whatever intentions, dreams, aspirations that you want to set forth over the coming year, or goals that you want to put out into the world. I'd like to open the floor up for that. Yeah. Aaron, would you like to start?
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Our favorite male.
I'd love to start off and just say how hopeful I am for this upcoming year. I really am. I think I've talked with both of you about it too, but I just feel like it can't be as bad as this year, right? So
I think a lot of us are feeling that way, a lot of us are like, this year brought everything.
Like, I feel, so I'm hopeful. I think for me, there's so much personally that I intend to do and see for this upcoming year. One of the biggest lessons I've learned, especially this year, is learning to come to terms with my sexuality. And I think for me, going forward in this upcoming year, whatever that means, I intend to I guess just actually embrace and accept myself. I've accepted it, or I've seen other folks, especially in my closest circle and my family, embrace it and embrace me openly. I just don't feel like I've personally have done that myself. And there's so much behind that that so many within the LGBTQ community can relate to. But I'm learning, and I'm excited to learn more about myself and what this means and how I can navigate my life with it. So again, I'm still learning, but again, I have spaces as this to kind of have an open dialogue and just to learn so many lessons from it. So I would say that's my biggest thing. On top of budgeting better, waking up early, just on top of all those things.
Did you say waking up early?
Don't get me started about that. I got me a dog this year, everyone, and I still have not nailed down structure in our apartment. So maybe that's me and Kobe's thing, and for next year. So, but yeah, that's my big thing, I would say, or the intentions I see for myself for next year. So
yeah, we'd love to see it. Embrace your whole self. I think that's a beautiful intention to work for the new year. Lai?
Well, first, I wasn't expecting that out of Aaron, and knows Aaron and I knows, like, he's one of my absolute best friends. Like, I consider him family. So he's over here talking, and I'm again getting emotional. But like I said, I cry all the time. I cry when I'm happy, when I'm sad, when I'm mad. So I'm over here just trying not to cry. But just so you know, I'm proud of you, and you'll work on that next year, and I'll be right there cheering you on. I think all of us will. My intentions for next year, I think a huge one for me would be just taking risks as far as doing things that I want to do, or things that I set out to do, things that I love to do, because I'm very much the type of person, I hate failing, and I understand that that's a part of the process and that's a part of life, but for some reason, it's just this year, I think, was the first year that I really opened myself up to some of these new projects. And my closest friends know, you guys know, that it was just that type of year for me where I quit a job where I was unhappy at, and and then from there I was just like, might as well just take more risks and just live more in the moment and be more involved. And so I think prior to this year I was just holding myself back a lot in these aspects, and so that's kind of my intention for next year. I guess it's kind of vague, but for me, that's something I've struggled with, and so I just want to. I want to take more risks. I want to do more things that I love doing. So yeah.
We all need to be a little more fearless.
Yeah. Well, this year was fearful. This year made it harder. This year, man, it was like from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. It was just like not. As
Non-stop.
soon as Kobe passed away, rest in peace,
I'm telling
Kobe.
you.
Literally, it was like the pandemic right after that, and then one thing after another. But some good did come out of 2020, and so, like Aaron, I hope to be hopeful next year in taking those risks. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I've coined this year as like the year of mourning. And there's just so many things that we've been hit on so many levels. Again, we've touched on financially, personally, politically, and it seemed never ending. And so I feel like we're in this perpetual state of like trauma, and then learning to mourn because of, actual lives being lost. And then, there's so much. And I want to always have hope as well, because I feel like it informs the way in which I operate. And so I never want to come from a place of completely like a place of doom and gloom. I want to always have like hope in my spirit so I can give that to other people.
Amen.
I think for myself, I've career-wise as an independent artist, I've done so much, and it's been great to like finally be like paid for my labor and art. I think next year, what that looks like for me, taking the next step would be to finally produce a book of poetry, which I've been so fortunate to like share in different community spaces and be, again, compensated for it. But now I just really want to compile all of it and put that out into the world. And I know there are times when I like get down on myself. I'm like, why the heck are you writing poems? And like, why are you why are most of them about love? But then I'm like, there are no people like me who are doing these things that we can like historicize and have for future generations. And so, when I have that imposter syndrome creep up, I'm just like, it's okay, because I'm the only person like me, and I feel like if I don't do it, who will? And I think the same for all of you.
Yeah.
We're just also talented in our different ways, and like, if we don't take that initiative to go and do these things that we are gifted, whether we believe a high power gave it to us or, it's just innate, I think it's important that we go ahead and do it.
Right.
I love that, because I think when it comes to self-expression, I think that's so important. I know there's so many, especially elitists, that are out there just saying like how that produces no results, doesn't produce money or income. But man, there's, again, with 2020, like that's just taught us so many lessons on what's really important. So with me, self-expression is just, that's everything. Because especially our mental health, like that's so important. And if we have an outlet or space to express ourselves, then that's what keeps us healthy. That's what keeps us happy. As many know, like mine is dance. Yours is poetry, among other many things, especially like establishing this space here, and with Lai, it's maybe her voice, it's her social presence. We all have our way of expressing ourselves. So I think it's important for so many of us to find that outlet and use it, and don't be afraid to use it. And we shouldn't hold people back to do that, or to find those spaces and those outlets.
Well, and I think 2020, it allowed us to kind of like zero in on those things, whether it was our, our artistic projects, or for me, a little bit of more like my more creative. I don't feel like I'm that creative, but my creative side came out a little bit because we, essentially social life was pretty much in your own home this year.
So limited.
Yeah, it was so limited. A lot of it was online, virtually. And so even for some of my peers, just seeing their like creative side come out even more so because of the conditions, it was really cool to see. And I hope in 2021 we just we see even more of it, and we see even more of our people, like the PI community specifically, come out and do these things, whether it's writing a book, sharing dances, producing movies, whatever it may be. I think this year allowed a lot of us to open ourselves to those avenues. So
absolutely,
yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been a show. Do we have any final closing words from either of you?
Just remain hopeful. It's been a rough year. It's been, we can't lie and say that it hasn't been hard. I think for every single one of us, it's been hellish in some ways. And so just going into next year, being hopeful and, hoping for change.
Oh yeah, definitely. Just because I am who I am, I do have to say, if we have Pacific Islanders in the state of Georgia, make sure you vote next month in the runoff elections. That helps determine the majority in the Senate, which affects policy that affects all of us. So,
very true.
I had to. This is me.
Yeah.
I just had to. We do have a lot of PI people that are there, so I just wanted to shout out them, and yeah.
That's not my forte, so I'd love to see it. I don't know. I think you both really touched on it deeply. It's just remaining hopeful, and I'm grateful that we made it to this point. Hopefully we can make it to this point again next year.
Next year.
Hopefully Mo'unga is still alive and well in some facet. I don't know what the vision is yet. We will connect heads and make that happen at some point in 2021. No rush.
And this being our first episode like this, I mean, everyone that's followed our page, you've seen we've done it like Zoom style, but
this is so
initially,
weird.
We're a little nervous, we're a little anxious, but this was initially your vision, right?
Yeah.
Was to make it a more in-person, intimate type of discussion or dialogue. And so I think it's very telling that at the end of the year we got the opportunity to even do this and be here. It's cool.
Let me highlight as well, this was a space and platform that Reina created
right
out of this 2020 hellish chaotic year. So let that be another lesson too, how great she is.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
No, for real.
Hopefully I'm not coughing in the mic too much or we can see it, but yeah, I couldn't have imagined. I mean, I think, again, I've been talking for a while, and then we've talked in diners and restaurants, just hey y'all, I think I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
And so to be able to bring it to fruition with y'all, the people that we started with, is exciting and amazing. And I fuck 2020, fuck Donald Trump, but I'm so glad that we got to do this, and we got to do cool shit together as community who cares and loves one another, but also community as a whole. And whether people agree with everything that I've said on this platform remains to be seen. I'm open to having more of these dialogues and discussions, so that my voice isn't the end all be all. I like having a more fuller, rounder perspective on everything. So. But yeah, that's been a show. We don't really ever have a closeout. I don't know. Peace and love.
It's just different this time.
Happy holidays, wherever you are in the world.
Shout out to our camera crew.
Yes, the Kupu brothers. We're so grateful for y'all.
Amazing.
And yeah, we will see you in 2021. Thank you for joining us.
Love you all.
It's so different doing it in person.